Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by saluting Mrs. Mariam Rajavi. Thank you very much for inviting us, and my salute to every member of the great National Council of Resistance of Iran. Keep up the good work. You will see a free Iran soon. Thank you for having us here. I salute the former Prime Minister, former government leaders, former parliamentarians, and the future leaders and parliamentarians of a free Iran sitting and joining us here in the back. As was mentioned, many of us come from a long ways away. I don't know if Bolivia is furthest from where everybody's come here from, but I can guarantee you is the highest. The city where I live, La Paz, the airport is 4,000 meters. We welcome you to come. The only place in the planet where Lionel Messi has never scored a goal. He's been there 3 times. He will try again in September. We'll see how he does. Mrs. Rajavi, I wanted to first tell you why I'm here. Second, make a point on coordination. And third, women. First, why am I here? I think Martin Luther King, we should paraphrase him, was right. The saying was, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You can paraphrase and adapt that to autocrats and democracy. Autocrats anywhere are a threat to democracy everywhere. Mullahs in Iran are a threat to democracy everywhere. And that's why we should coordinate and help the people that are in the midst of this struggle. I've known this in my region for a long, long time. We have a triad of tyrants in my part of the world. Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua are run by dictators. My country has a government that is on the waiting list to join that club. So it is of importance to me to have a free Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua in Latin America. And I know for a fact that that requires Ukraine prevailing in its war against Putin and a free Iran, because autocrats do help each other, and we have to help each other in our common goals. That's the second point. The second point I wanted to make, coordination. Autocrats and dictators coordinate. The ones of us that want freedom and democracy do not, unfortunately. And this is the first effort that I've been part of where somebody from Latin America can wish Ukraine victory against Putin and can ask the NCRI to stay in the struggle until you have a free Iran, because the autocrats do coordinate. I can give you 10,000 examples, some quick ones. I first saw Yulia Tymoshenko and Viktor Yushchenko on TV in Venezuela. Chavez, sitting on a pile of oil money, buying campaigns everywhere from Venezuela. With the help of Cuba, it was a wonderful marriage. The Cuban repressive know-how with the Venezuela oil checkbook on how to pay. They worked together and seized a lot of our countries. Chavez on TV, he funded Yanukovych. He would say, Tymoshenko, CIA agent, Yushchenko, CIA agent, they're all made up. He was helping Yanukovych and funding Yanukovych in Ukraine, and they were helping each other. Belarus, you may think, what does Belarus have to do with Latin America? Let me tell you what it has to do. Lukashenko was going to run against Sergei. He jailed him, thinking that's it for the presidency of Belarus. The spouse, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, ran and beat him. Lukashenko had to kill and maim people in Belarus. So what happens a few months later in Nicaragua? Ortega, the tyrant of Nicaragua, learns from Belarus, and he jails all my friends who wanted to run for president. He's now kicked them out and removed their passports. Autocrats coordinate, dictators learn from each other. Iran, we had the unfortunate pleasure, Mrs. Rajavi, of having Ahmadinejad show up in my country twice, 2009, 2012. What did he have to do with Bolivia? Nothing. The Venezuelan and Cuban friends he had would bring him to parade around Latin America. So on Iranian TV, They could pretend that they have friends everywhere worldwide. And we have no links whatsoever with Ahmadinejad. Vahidi, a minister of defense of Iran, came to set up a military training school funded by Venezuela in the eastern part of my country to do repression. And he was directly linked with the AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires in 1994. Created a big scandal. But that shows you the level of ingrained cooperation amongst autocrats. And I can tell you, I've been saying about Venezuela, which has been destroyed by the dictatorship, it's an occupied country. It's occupied by not the sheriff, but the sheriff with a C. It's an acronym. Cuba, Hezbollah, ELN, Colombian guerrillas, Russia, Iran, and FARC. It's an occupied country. So it is in our joint interest to, if we want a free Venezuela, we need a free Iran. If we want a free Iran, we got to have a free Venezuela. And if you don't believe me, Google Lavrov, April last. Tour of Latin America, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Google Raisi, June 2023, a tour of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Look at the UN votes on Ukraine. You will always see Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and my country always voting for Putin. I call them in Spanish, all those regimes, sons of Putin, which in Spanish is a little more colorful. It's saying bad things about somebody's mother. Final point on Democrats and what we have to coordinate. It's a wonderful 10-point plan. Osvaldo Payá, the freedom fighter that was killed by the Cubans in 2012, had something like that. He signed a petition in Cuba against the Castros, similar to what you're doing with the NCRI. He was killed for it inside of Cuba about 10 years ago. The OAS just established last week that he was murdered. It was not a car accident. He was murdered in Cuba. So that, the simplicity of a short document that says free and fair elections, independent institutions, freedom of expression, human rights, freedom of association, alternability in power, which is very important. Raúl Castro in Cuba and Ramiro Valdés, they have been mismanaging that country longer than I have been alive. And I'm a grandfather already. But that's how long they've been in power, and we know how long the Ayatollahs have seized and taken power. And in this coordination, it is important that we demand from the governments that are democratic in the US and Canada and the EU, absolute consistency. We do not want their help in our struggle, but please stop helping the autocrats, because many times, in a misguided way, they help the autocrats. For example, there's Venezuelan refugees in Colombia. Could somebody go and attack them? No. There's Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Could Putin bomb those camps in Poland or in Germany? No. Then why do you stay quiet when in Albania they repress freedom-loving Iranians who are in that country? Stand up and say something. Like Messi told the Dutch, I do not hear you. Say something when that happens in Albania. I'll close with the importance of women. Not all men are autocrats, but pretty much all autocrats are men. So that means that women have to do more for us, because you will not be, when they talk about freeing countries from dictators, the Castros, Ortega, Maduro, they're all men. And there's women that are in this struggle. The daughter of Payá, the iconic Cuban that was killed by the Castros, she carries the torch, Rosa Maria Payá. Wonderful, wonderful, incredible woman. In Venezuela, come October, our last greatest hope, Maria Corina Machado, very good friend of mine, who's doing that fight. The Chamorros in Nicaragua. We have to get them together with you. Women that are fighting for freedom and democracy everywhere. And if we do that, we'll continue up the good work. I'll close by saying Slava Ukraina, Heroyam Slav for Ukraine. And there's something that is very painful to me, that the most ironic demand you can make at a bar late at night is Cuba Libre. It's rum and Coca-Cola. Ha ha ha, Cuba Libre. And it's like an ironic request. Well, I want that to be a primal scream born in the stomach that burns up the chest, comes out through the throat, and reverberates all across the Americas. And that will only happen when we can say, I have a free Cuba and I have a free Iran, to freedom everywhere. Thank you.